News tonight out of Maine. The Secretary of State there removing former President Donald Trump from the state's presidential primary ballot. This is the first move by an election official to take action independently in the decision.
Sometimes the truth hurts. That's when it's most important to see it. What they're doing to Donald Trump right now in Maine, you see the news today, it's unconstitutional, it's anti-American, it's wrong. I'm doing everything I can to stand against it.
Is Donald Trump eligible to be president again? That's the legal question facing this country after Maine became the second state to say he's not because of the 14th Amendment's ban on insurrectionists holding federal office. It is a recipe for constitutional chaos that the Supreme Court will almost surely have to solve.
The decision from Maine Secretary of State to remove Donald Trump from the Republican primary ballot is drawing harsh criticism and calls for an appeal. In statements to the Portland Press-Herald, the GOP leader in the Maine House called it a sham decision and warned it will not stand legal scrutiny. The state's Republican Senate leader says the decision undermines democracy and Maine voters deserve a primary process that allows for each party to decide its own candidates. The Maine GOP has said it will appeal that decision. Here's what the party chairman told CNN last night.
She has kicked a serious hornet's nest. I've heard just in the last couple of hours from so many independents, Democrats and Republicans alike, this isn't about Donald Trump. This is about our constitutional rights and the ability of the American people to elect into leadership the people that they choose.
It's a very detailed decision. We lay out why under Maine law, the Secretary of State has the authority, indeed the obligation, I'm duty bound to make this determination. Laid out that the record demonstrates that, in fact, the events of January 6, 2021, which were unprecedented and tragic, were an insurrection in the meaning of Section 3 of the 14th Amendment. And finally, in reviewing the facts presented, the evidence, the law, the history, we determined under Section 3 of the 14th Amendment that Mr. Trump engaged in insurrection and therefore was disqualified.
Now, I have to say, not only is this an incredibly important decision, but it's a very brave decision. The Trump campaign has already come out attacking you. They have said that you are a virulent leftist and a hyper-partisan Biden-supporting Democrat.
First and foremost, it's important to know my oath to the Constitution, my obligations to the Constitution and rule of law come before any other consideration. No other factors could weigh on that decision and did not. I'm duty bound to both hold a hearing and make a ruling. And under the law, there's a very compressed timeline. In evaluating this, I came to the conclusion that I could not, unfortunately or fortunately, to the conclusion that I could not, unfortunately or fortunately, wait for the United States Supreme Court to make a decision. The Maine law required me to issue that decision, which I did today. I smile because we were #1 in voter turnout per capita in 2022. We are really proud of that. And we have a really strong framework of election laws that encourage citizen participation. We have same-day voter registration. We have no excuse absentee voting up to 30 days prior to Election Day. We make it really easy to register to vote, to cast your ballot, and know your ballot will be counted. And we're really proud of our national leadership in voter participation and citizen engagement in elections and in the democratic process. It's a very detailed decision.
The idea that one bureaucrat in an executive position can simply unilaterally disqualify someone from office, that turns on its head every notion of constitutional due process that this country's always abided by for over 200 years.
Again, I am so mindful, and I said this in my decision, that it is unprecedented. No Secretary of State has ever deprived a presidential candidate of ballot access based on Section 3 of the 14th Amendment. But no presidential candidate has ever engaged in insurrection and been disqualified under Section 3 of the 14th Amendment.
And Secretary Bellows, would love to hear about your thoughts on the biggest threats facing our democracy at this point in time.
Well, what Secretary Griswold just said and named is something that was unimaginable
2 years ago or 10 years ago, and that is election sabotage. It is a crystal clear example of what's happening all across the country. So we need to organize to make sure we have better leaders in positions of power to fight back against that. Secretary Benson talked about voter suppression, and that's something that when we started our careers at the ACLU and Southern Poverty Law Center, fighting back about systematic, structural voter oppression, targeting specifically Black and brown voters. It's rooted in white supremacy. That is something we have to continue to do work on. And Secretary Merrill talked about the For the People Act and the Freedom to Vote Act. We must have federal standards all across the country. And then finally, just to echo my colleagues, this is rooted in a deliberate and organized campaign to discourage people from participating in our democracy. It is an attack on our very democracy itself, because when everyone participates, everything that we care about, social justice, climate justice, economic justice, we win. Those on the other side are trying to discourage people from participating. That's what this really is about. We have to fight back to protect our democracy, to protect everything.
That's such a good point.
It's ironic that just a few months ago, she put out this tweet saying, quote, "It shouldn't be up to the governor or any other one person, whether or not you have the right to vote." She said, "We are proud that in Maine, every citizen has the right to vote, regardless of current or former incarceration." Well, now she has become that one person who is robbing people of their right to vote for Trump. White House visitor logs show that Maine's Secretary of State was invited to the White House last March, where she snapped the selfie with Biden, writing, quote, "Amazing to meet President Biden." It's also amazing how helpful she's being to his campaign, as she unilaterally just defeated his biggest opponent. She's also been a longtime Obama and Clinton supporter and has the selfies to prove it. In fact, she's so anti-Trump that she even participated in the anti-Trump Women's March after Trump was inaugurated in 2017. If she ever had the power to ban the man she hates the most, would she do it in spite of the voters? Well, now we know the answer to that.
Were the processes, were these hearings fair? Did they comport with due process? And I think there's a question there with regard to what Maine did, because if you look at the hearing, and she details this in the ruling, they heard from one fact witness, a law professor. She based her ruling on a lot of documents, but also YouTube clips, news reports, things that would never pass the bar in normal court. She's not a lawyer, by the way. It's a smartly written decision, clearly consulted with lawyers, but this is an unelected. She's chosen by the state legislature.
She's elected by the state
legislature. Elected by the legislature, but not democratically elected. Not a knock. That's just the way it's set up in Maine. And this hearing, look, it doesn't have to be a criminal trial. We don't have to have all the protections. But I think the argument you'll hear from opponents is, one, not up to the states to do this. This is why we have all different decisions from all different states. And two, the procedures were not up to snuff.
Founded on. So I stand by my pledge. Any state where Donald Trump is forcibly removed from the ballot in this way, I'll also remove myself. And I challenge Chris Christie and Nikki Haley and Ron DeSantis to do the same thing, or else they're also complicit. If every Republican removes themselves from the ballot in Maine, that automatically stops this election interference in our GOP primary. Now, the fact that they're not doing it reveals that there's something deeper going on. This isn't just the Democrats. There's a force within the Republican establishment that's propped up a chosen puppet, and they're actually rooting for this same outcome every bit as much as the Democrats are. And I think it's time we open our eyes to this insidious game that's being played. I'm deeply worried, but I'm worried that I'm right about this, that what we're seeing right now, this isn't the end of the road. This is just the beginning of what they're planning to pull in 2024. And you mark my words on that. This is a system that has decided by hell or high water, at one cost or another, they will eliminate this man from contention in this election. You see that happening Colorado 2 days ago, Maine today. You wait for what's happening in 2024, and I'm worried for this country.
Vivek, the secretaries of states in 2020, secretaries of states, one individual would come in and wipe away the laws of the legislature and say, because of COVID, I'm changing mail-in balloting. One person changing election rules. That was 2020. 2024, one person saying, I am disenfranchising Trump voters. Your thoughts?
Well, look, Kayleigh, I think you phrased it well, but I would say that this is not an action of one person.
This is the action of an entire system that has an anaphylactic reaction to one man. And I think they're dropping the breadcrumbs. They're making it clearer by the day. I'm concerned that they will not allow this man to get anywhere near the start line of the election, let alone the finish line. And I say this as somebody who's running in the same race as Donald Trump. This is not how we should want to win. So I stand by the pledge I made earlier on the back of the Colorado decision, and I reiterate it today, that I will voluntarily, as a Republican candidate, remove myself from any GOP primary ballot where one of my competitors, Donald Trump included, is forcibly removed through this unconstitutional maneuver. And I think one thing that the other Republican candidates can do, Kayleigh, is to fight against this, to say that Ron DeSantis and Nikki Haley and Chris Christie do the same thing, that if Maine is going to do this, we then take Maine out of the GOP primary process. That's the logical way to handle this, and so I made that announcement tonight. I challenge every one of my other competitors in the GOP primary to do the same thing, to say that we will not stand by idly and watch this brazen form of election interference in the GOP primary itself. And I think that that's not a left-wing or a right-wing issue. It shouldn't be. This is about the Constitution and who we are as Americans. And that's why I've taken the position I have.